Happy Friday the 13th. Welcome once again to Cackling Carnarium. This is the EDH Study Hall, and I'm your host, Johnny Slivers. In my quest to point my eyeballs and ear holes and maybe even my left nostril at every single magic card in the history of the game, somehow, some way. We're currently in beta, and we're about to finish it up, actually. I think we're going to wrap this set up, and I don't know, maybe we'll just kind of play around, see what's up, see how things are going. Maybe there'll be people in the chat. Or not. We'll see. Alright, so let's go ahead. Make sure that's turned off. Yeah, so I'm still getting into my tempo here. Anyway, like I said, we are currently in beta. The last card we left off with on our last episode was Warp Artifact. That was the... What was the deal with Warp Artifact? I guess... I was talking about how cards like Warp Artifact, and let's go ahead and find it here. Cards like Warp Artifact, the downside is they only target one player at a time. And that's... I was thinking about that a little more. Things like Warp Artifact, Curse Land, Wanderlust cards, those types of enchantments, what they'll do is they'll only give you one target, and that can be a detriment in EDH. However, I was thinking about it a little more. If it's going to be dependent on your meta, and it's going to be dependent on what kind of players you're dealing with. So if it's better to put blood in the water, essentially, and only target one player without, say, turning it into an archenemy kind of game, that's when these cards might actually be more applicable. It's not always... Yeah, that's the only time I can think of it. Like, if you're trying to play a different kind of strategy where you want to create one enemy at a time, and you just want to grind them down with something like this, okay, I could see it. You know, this could make some sense. But at the end of the day, it doesn't maximize the effectiveness of the card, and that's really what I'm more concerned about personally. But if your meta calls for it, it might actually be worth running a card like Warp Artifact. But all that said, it's time to move on to the rest of the set. And the next one is Water Elemental. It is a boring vanilla card. It's 3 and 2 blue for a 5/4 creature. Summon elemental. It's elemental, so it's elemental specific. That matters, but I mean, there's lots of better elementals. It's just don't play it. I mean, unless you really like that flavor text, and that's when they used to fill them up with all kinds of flavor text. But ultimately, no, this one's a dud. I would say don't even worry about the numbers. Just pass. We'll just pass. So, let's go ahead and... Just checking one more thing here. I'll pop that out. Just in case we have any company. All right. So after Water Elemental is Weakness. Weakness is an enchantment, an aura. It's an enchant creature for 1 black mana. And I've always wondered if it doesn't do all that much. It's kind of turns creatures into just a lump. They're not really useful. It can take out a Birds of Paradise. Did I get that right? I think so. Birds are all ones, right? But ultimately, it's not really good removal. It's kind of like this shoddy removal that has been replaced by lots of other enchantments that do a better job. So Weakness is kind of just, it's supposed to slow down the aggro kind of thing, but there's better things. Better ways of doing it. This is really not going to be something you want to run in EDH just because it's going to be kind of a punt. If you top deck that and you need like an actual kill spell, that's not going to get there for you. On to Web. Web has got some reprint love. It got the 4th edition, then it fell off the face of the planet, came back for 9th edition, so it is technically modern playable, but I don't think anyone uses it. So it's an enchant creature, an aura for 1 green. You enchant the enchanted creature, right, reminder text. Enchanted creature gets +0/+2 and can block as though it had flying. So it basically puts an added like giant spider stats onto any creature. Now for an aura build, if you're going if you're going like the Pants deck, or if you're going for some kind of like Enchantment Matters deck, that could be okay. I think there are going to be, I think as we go through the history of the game, we're going to find cards that will do similar things better. But for 1 green mana, it creates a creature that can become very useful for blocking. It just giving something reach makes it that much more efficient. But again, I don't think it's always going to be like this. This feels like it would be easily cut for something better. So that's my hot take on that one. I don't even think we want it. This is probably not even worth checking for EDH rec. It'll be, I'm guessing, very low numbers. After Web is Wheel of Fortune. Oh, Wheel of Fortune. Why did I trade you away? I had a copy or two once upon a time. And this card does work. As opposed to something like, was it Time Twister? I think it was Time Twister, as opposed to Time Twister. This is kind of a different game plan. Now, because there's a lot of graveyard shenanigans, and just to start off, Wheel of Fortune, you play an EDH. You just play this card. If you have this card, you play this card. I wish I had one. It'd be great in a Nekuzar deck. It is 2 and a red for sorcery. In this oldest version, it says both players. The truth of the matter is, you go to the revised version, all players must discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. So this is great in like a Jund Reanimator deck. This goes great in a Nekuzar deck. This is basically, this resets the entire everyone's hand. So very seldom are you going to find somebody countering this unless it's playing into something like a Nekuzar strategy, where if they draw 7 cards, they're taking 7 damage or 14 damage or 28 damage, depending on how many of those draw penalties you have out of built, playing in that deck, and they happen to be in effect. Then that would be when people try and counter this. But usually people are happy to see a new full grip of 7 cards by the 10th turn. So Wheel of Fortune is kind of like a party favor and does a lot of work. This is just a slam dunk in red. There's very little reason to not play this. If you have a Wheel of Fortune, if you're looking to get one, it'll cost you. You're just shot is 87. Is the Card Sphere is putting it at 87 for a revised version. Unlimited is going to run you over $300. They are expensive. They are on the reserve list. So basically, when the buyouts happened, that's what happened. The buyouts really made it pretty pricey. So they're never coming back. I find it very hard to believe they would ever come back down. But if you buy one to keep it, and it's totally worth having. It does get, if you, even with the revised version, it is getting up there to the point where you want to be cautious about, playing that in your EDH deck. If you're worried about something walking away, just, take extra precautions. Make sure you're doing your due diligence to make sure you're protecting yourself from theft. But, sweet card. There's really very little arguing. Let's go ahead. You know what? Let's go ahead and look up the stats. I want to see how many decks are actually playing Wheel of Fortune. Not a question of whether it's relevant, but whether the card is relevant. But there's a supply issue there. We're talking about cards that are not in high supply, not compared to the print runs that we see today. Good old EDH rec. Wheel of Fortune. Showing up in only 7%, 8,500 decks overall, almost 8,600, and I wouldn't be surprised if part of that is a scarcity. I know for newer players, if you're brand new to EDH, or you've only been playing for a couple of years and you're only in the game for the last couple of years, the odds that you have access to this kind of a card are going to be low. Now, there are lots of other wheel effects out there. There's plenty of options for you to go with. This one's one of the more efficient ones. But it's definitely, you can find this ability in other cards. It's just this is going to be that kind of crown jewel of a wheel effect. So you want to, trade up or hunt around for it. What is it? They're showing Card Kingdom putting it at $110. Yeah, you're looking at, you're probably spending about $100 to get one of these cards. It's an investment, and it's an investment in the game. So if you love the deck you're building, this is something that you want to put in that deck. That you're buying it to keep it. Really, that would be my advice. I mean, people want to play the finance game. Good on them. I'm not the person to advise you on that. I definitely have bad purchases in my history. I've made some good calls too, but it's mixed. So I'm not the kind of person you want advice. There is a sea of people in finance who can talk to you with more saged, learned wisdom than me on finance. But this card, you got a chance to get on that, you get on that. All right, after Wheel of Fortune, moving on to White Knight, the counterpart to the Black Knight, and printed many, many times through the history of the game. Latest printing showing up in the Magic 2011. So that's coming up, it's about 8 years ago at this point. So White Knight is 2 white for a 2/2 with first strike, human knight, and has protection from black. And I mean, for a 2/2, the stats are pretty good. A first strike and having protection from a relevant color, this protects it from a lot of removal. And I think probably that's where White Knight is probably better than Black Knight, because there's, you think when it comes to removal, in my mind, I think black and red definitely have those removal tools. White does have removal, but it doesn't. I don't know. There's a lot of its condition. There's a lot of conditional removal in white. In EDH, there's going to be plenty of things that this can just nerf. Like, this can bounce some relevant big bads in EDH. So, it's not a bad card. Because it's a human knight, with Eldraine coming out, we've got a lot of knight relevant kind of mechanics going on. So it's kind of, in the grand scheme of knights, like knight tribal, it's kind of vanilla, but it's a great placeholder if you're brewing and trying to fine tune. I mean, you'll have access to black and white knights for the new Eldraine based kind of EDH decks for the knights. So yeah, this is okay. I don't get wowed by it. I wouldn't say it's the worst card. There will be better options that come along, but it's a nice start point. So I wouldn't snub it entirely. I don't know what my thoughts were on Black Knight. I think probably not as favorable, but now that we have the kind of support that we have for this tribe in the game coming out with this latest set, then yeah, these things, it changes the filter. So White Knight, okay, I'd say there are better options, but we'll see how it goes in the next couple of months. After White Knight is White Ward. This is again one of those cards, set it on fire or use it as a shim to balance your table. It's one for an enchant creature. Target creature gains protection from white. There are better wards. There's better wards, and this is really specific. You got to know your meta for it to even be relevant. But I'd say pass. I wouldn't bother going ahead with this one. All right, so after White Ward, we have Wild Growth. Wild Growth is one of the original kind of enchantment mana ramp cards from the very beginning of the game. Wild Growth, and so always this, like, you look at the betas and they've got this, like, the colors were all so washed together. It was always good to go to something with a little more contrast there. So 1 green for an enchant land. Wild Growth adds green to your mana pool whenever target land is tapped for mana. So if you tap the land for mana, it adds an additional green whenever you tap the mana. So basically you get 2 mana for the price of 1. So it's kind of like mana ramp, and since like in EDH that could be okay, but honestly, there's like, as this is like the genesis of a type of mechanic or a type of card, and there are lots of cards out there that do this better. What is it? Utopia Sprawl is one of them. I think there's a couple other. There's lots. You go through the history of the game, and you will find lots of green enchantments that have this kind of an effect. Some do it better, some don't do it quite as well. I'd say maybe this kind of falls in the middle because its casting cost is so low. But I think you shop around, see what you got available to you. There are things that'll give you a draw when you play the card, or some kind of extra bonus when you do that. So this is kind of the vanilla of that camp of mechanics. After Wild Growth, we have, moving on down to Willow the Wisp. Willow the Wisp was kind of a thing. They haven't reprinted this since 4th edition. All right, so relatively inexpensive cost-wise as far as like secondary market. 4th edition is going for a little over $1. Revised is going for $2.50. That's not bad. It's 1 black for a 0/1 flyer with pay 1 black for regenerate. It's also pretty cool. I think this is that one of the ones. No, some of the old cards had like quotes from from famous like poets and authors. I think they're quoting Shakespeare and stuff like that. I couldn't remember if this was one of them. Samuel Coolidge. Okay. I'd have to look him up. I'm not familiar with him, but I have a feeling that is a relevant author in the history of humankind. So Willow the Wisp is one of these early game bodies that's hard to get rid of in most cases because it's got that regeneration ability. This would be one of those creatures that would go in a deck where you're running Birds of Paradise and Ornithopters and a lot of early drop flyers that you buff up with equipment or enchantments to get that kind of early game advantage. But usually I feel like it's something that works better in a one-on-one. When you're dealing in EDH, this is going to be like, there's your little blocker and it can stop one thing and live, and usually I don't think that's going to be as potent. I don't think the numbers are going to be very strong analytically as well. I wanted to go take a look too, just to make sure I'm not talking completely. Yeah, it's showing up in very, very few. And what showed up in M25 was some pretty cool artwork. That's pretty sweet, but just over 224 decks is not a lot. That's 0%. So yeah, this is not going to be. This doesn't have a big pull for EDH. It's just not that strong of a card overall. All right, now getting back to the list, let's go ahead and check this out. After Willow the Wisp, we've got Winter Orb. Oh, Winter Orb and your totally fair magic. Let's see, printed up until 5th edition, then seeing reprints in Eternal Masters. Winter Orb is... The new art's got some pretty funky, cool art. Yeah, I like that new art's pretty cool. So Winter Orb is a stacks card. It's a resource denial card. When it comes to EDH, this is the kind of card that will destroy friendships because this grinds games to a screeching halt. It is 2 for an artifact, it reads, as long as Winter Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than one land during their untap step. So this forces people, and it locks a lot of people out. It slows the game down, and usually when you're playing a Winter Orb in an EDH deck, you're playing a strategy that's looking to maximize that, lock everybody down, and just basically break everyone's will to play the game. This is going to be, and it's good to look at the new version. It's important to read that text because when you look at these older versions, you go back to revised. Okay, so all players may not untap more than one land during the untap phase of each turn. Okay, so in the wording is different from like a revised version to the Eternal Masters version, because early on the idea of if something is tapped, it is no longer active was a commonplace thing. They didn't usually like work that wording into the cards, but when it came to, as time went on, things like equipment could, I guess, technically be tapped down, or like they think something changed up. I don't know when. I'm not sure exactly about the finer details about it. We'll dig into that as we go along. But it's good to know if you come across an older version of Winter Orb, it is important to look up the Oracle text on this because the newer version has this relevant ability right here that you can tap this down. You find there are ways to tap things down. Like there's a new one out in Eldraine. Let's go ahead and pull up. Let's see, and go with Mythic Spoiler. So Mythic Spoiler has this new blue dragon, or for Eldraine. Eldraine's got this new blue dragon. Let me go find it. It's kind of weird. They park that. Here it is. Shimmer Dragon is going to be the stacks player's best friend. So Shimmer Dragon is 4 and 2 blue for a 5/6. We're talking vanilla stats of Mahatma Jin. As long as you control 4 more artifacts, Shimmer Dragon is hexproof, so it's going in an artifact build. This will be hard to kill. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to draw a card. So you basically have things like Static Orb, which is like a lesser Winter Orb, and Winter Orb in play. And then you just wait until the end step before your turn, and you tap down your Winter Orb, and right there, that's it. You've locked it out. You get to untap all your stuff. And this, honestly, something like this makes stacks more tolerable because at least there's an end in sight. People can be like, Shimmer Dragon's in play. We've been orbed. We're screwed. It's over. So either you can show them the money and actually put up a hard win and throw a beat down and actually win the game, as opposed to like just breaking people's will to play the game. Or yeah, that's like Shimmer Dragon is what Stacks would have. I like that combination. If you're gonna play Stacks, at least have a plan. Like show them that here's the numbers. I'm actually gonna beat you, and not actually have to play out my entire deck. Then people will be like, okay, you got me, fine. At least that's how it runs in my head. But yeah, when it comes to Winter Orb, make sure if you get an older version of cards like this, check that Oracle text. It does matter. Some of the very old stuff is going to have little interactions that aren't written into the card because the rules, the game operated in different ways back then in certain scenarios. So be mindful of that. When we get moving on here, let's see. Winter Orb. Yep, done. After Winter Orb, we've got Wooden Sphere. Okay. It's an one mana artifact. It's, what is that? Yeah, poly artifact. God. Okay, so it is one of those, again, there's other artifacts that do this job more efficiently. Whenever a player plays a green spell, you may pay 1. If you do, you gain 1 life. So yeah, it's kind of like this little grind out some advantage kind of card, but the fact that you are paying 1 per green spell played, and it's kind of like, well, where is it gonna? There's better things to do with your mana. I would say go a different route. So here we go. After Wooden Sphere, I mean the old original art's pretty cool. Word of Command. Now, this one didn't get past Unlimited, and I never really got too familiar with this card. And it's quite wordy, so let's go ahead and get some Oracle text. Alright, Word of Command. Even the Oracle text is still a mountain. Alright, so it's an instant for 2 black, and it goes as this. Look at target opponent's hand and choose a card from it. You control that player until Word of Command finishes resolving. The player plays that card. The player plays that card if able. While doing so, the player can activate mana abilities only if they're from lands that player controls, and only if mana they produce is spent to activate other mana abilities of lands the player controls and or to play that card. If the chosen card is cast as a spell, you control the player while the spell is resolving. It's funky. That's a funky card. Look at target opponent's hand and choose a card from it. Alright, so you're choosing a card. You control that player until Word of Command finishes resolving. Okay. The player plays that card. Alright, so the card that you chose, the player plays. Okay. While doing so, the player can activate mana abilities only if they're from lands that player controls, and only if mana they produce is spent to activate other mana abilities of lands the player controls and or to play that card. Alright. If the chosen card is cast as a spell, you control the player while that spell is resolving. Okay, so you're looking at someone's hand, you are picking a card, and you're forcing your opponent to play that card, and you have control over how they implement that card. As opposed to, so this is a mini Mindslaver. Okay, I think I got that. That's interesting. Now, it's funny that you only get to, that's, collector's editions aren't too high. Unlimited is on $172, probably for scarcity of the card. I imagine that might be on reserve list. Let's check that out. MTG stock. Nope. So word of command is reserve list. Okay, so that explains part of the pricing. What is this version? Unlimited was in that $50 range for the longest time. And then it got that spike. When was that buyout? Was that during a buyout? 2017. Yeah, like in 2018, that's when we saw those really big spiky buyouts from the reserve list. So word of command is kind of like, yeah, that's how I'm kind of interpreting this. This is basically going to be a mini Mindslaver for a specific card in your opponent's hand. It feels too narrow for EDH. I feel like if it was truly EDH playable, this would have probably commanded a higher price than what it's showing here. And that's kind of like that's my kind of gut feeling here. I imagine the numbers partly on scarcity, but I think also on playability is part of it. Word command EDH rec put in only, yeah, this is, I think between the scarcity of the card and the fact that it only targets a single card in an opponent's hand and forces them to, you can control how they're playing that card, and it's at instant speed. So if they've got, the one application I can see for this is forcing Cyclonic Rift at an inopportune time, or forcing a Wrath effect at a time that wouldn't be advantageous for the person who would play that. I don't know. It's a neat card, but I think it's too narrow in scope as far as being applied to EDH. So I think I would say probably pass. If you got one, dang, like, kind of take someone by surprise with that one. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a scarcity and not quite as powerful as you'd like it to be. It's better in like a one-on-one when you want to nerf their hand. And it's cheap. That's the one upside, is 2 black as opposed to Mindslaver. That's a good chunk of mana to actually activate and operate that. Moving on to our second to last card, it's Wrath of God, and this is absolutely a playable, plain and simple. It has had many, many printings over the years, and even with all of those printings, it is still commanding $6 to $7 for secondary market retail. Yeah, this goes in, if you're playing white, you have a Wrath of God. It goes along right next to Day of Judgment. There's a couple other Wrath abilities, but 4 mana. It's 2 and 2 white, and reads all creatures in play. All creatures in play are destroyed and cannot be regenerated. I think, what did they call it? When they got to revised, it read differently. Does it say buried? There was here we go. All creatures in play are buried. This is their way of being able to say, if they're buried, you can't regenerate them. There's like a special kind of removal, getting around the regeneration part. But it just has lots and lots of versions out there. Destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. So there's a lot of it printed out there. The fact that they can't be regenerated helps get around things like Thrun, the Last Troll, and a lot of other like regenerating hexproof kind of creatures. So the Wrath of God is kind of like the benchmark for board wipe. But there are bigger, badder Wraths of God that do hit more than just creatures. There are one like Planar, I think it's Planar Cleanse, cost 6 mana to wipe the board of all permanents. Those are, the casting cost kind of keeps their price under control. But the Wrath of God is really like, if you're in white, and it's always good to have a board wipe. If you got a Wrath of God, you play your Wrath of God. It's just that simple. It probably has decent numbers in the EDH Rec analytics. Yeah, it shows up in 19% of the decks. So basically, the 1/5 of EDH decks that happen to have white in their color scheme play a Wrath of God because they are supposed to. That's how that works. All right, and then finally on the list, we're gonna get to the last one here. Click back here. The last card in beta that we'll be covering is Zombie Master. One of the original lords for zombies. Got printings up through 6th edition. It is a 2/3. Am I reading that right? Yep, there. Now I can actually read it because of the contrast. It's a 2/3 for 1 and 2 black. It is a creature lord. I wouldn't be surprised if the eroded versions have it as a zombie, and we can go check that in Scryfall. I'll check in just a moment here. And the ability is all zombies get pay 1 black, regenerate this creature, and swamp walk. So it didn't give zombies any kind of a buff. It gave them a form of evasion, and gave you the option to actually regenerate them. It hits all zombies. Now, in the earliest days, it was classified as a lord, so people would say, well, it's a lord, it's not a zombie. I think they fixed that, and since this is Study Hall, we are going to check on that and make sure that is the case. Zombie Lord. Oh, Zombie Master. I'm having a total brain fart there. All right, Zombie Master. All right, Zombie Master is classified as a zombie. So when you're playing Paper Magic and you find a Zombie Master, it is going to be creature type zombie, even though you're not going to see that on the cards. Just kind of be aware of that if you're building a zombie build for EDH. I mean, if you're going zombies, this is definitely worth considering. The numbers might not be as strong because there are other lords out there that will give your zombies a buff or something better to go with, but it's nothing to shake a stick at. There's plenty of, like when I did that breakdown on the Paladins, we went looking through all of the EDH like top commanders, and like in the top 20, there's always your top of the week, top of the month, and there's got a bunch of them in black. There's a ton of commanders in black. So when it comes to the evasion with the swamp walk, that's not completely irrelevant. And I mean, you've got a whole sub theme of zombies going on anyway, so it's not a reason to not play this card. If there's anything, it's just any reason to not play the card would be that it's not gaining you enough board advantage with so many other zombie lord and advantage options that are out there. So let's just take a quick look. The EDH analytics only shows up in 2%, probably because there are other lords, because there are other zombie lords that will give the entire field that you have an actual buff, like make them stronger. So that's probably why it gets passed over. And it being an older card, there might be a lot of players that just aren't aware of it. That's totally possible too. So just something to think about. All right, so there it is. We did it. We got through beta. And what we'll be doing I was thinking originally when I started this project, I was like, okay, we're just going to go and start at the beginning and just work our way up through them, and we'll get to M20 in 5 or 6 years. I'm having a second thought about that. So what we'll be doing, actually, I'm going to go, as we go through the history of Magic, I'm going to alternate it. So when you go to my YouTube page, you're going to find, or you go to my YouTube channel, I'm going to set these up in 2 lists. There'll be the EDH Study Hall list, just basic list from episode 1 until infinity. And then there will be lists specific to sets. So this will wrap up the beta set. And then I think we're going to I don't know what I'm going to do in the meantime. Maybe I'll look at some of the pre-constructed decks, go through those. We will repeat some of these. Part of that is kind of like that repetition will help us get reoriented with these cards and make sure we're burning them into our brain. So once the Eldraine spoilers are finished, or spoilers, preview season, whatever you want to call it, once that list is complete, I like going through Cardsphere just to kind of go through my list to be my starting point. Hopefully in the next week we'll pick up with Eldraine. I'll find something else to do in the meantime just to kind of keep the ball rolling. But yeah, we're going to go moving on to Throne of Eldraine and talk about its application to EDH and what I think is good and what I like about things and what I don't like about some of the cards. And then we'll just, once we get through Eldraine, we'll go back to an old set. We'll probably get back to the 1993, 94. I think we'll probably check in. Let's go look at some timelines here. So if you're interested in when sets were released throughout the history of the game, I believe it's MTG Wiki. Is that the one? MTG Wiki MTG. I'll find it here. Just a moment. It's got to be. Wait for it. Okay, list of Magic the Gathering sets. All right, so what is it? EN is on Wikipedia, enwikipedia.org, and this is the list of Magic the Gathering card sets. And we have, I think, set, alpha, beta, unlimited. So yeah, they have all the core sets and their release dates. Alpha came out in August of 93. Beta was October. Looks like Unlimited hit in December of that year, and then Revised was April of 94. Shortly before I actually started playing the game. Now that's just the core sets. You scroll on down here, they'll show you when the actual expansion sets fired off, and it looks like December of 93 was the first expansion with Arabian Nights. So probably what we'll do is after Eldraine, we will move back in history and pick up with Arabian Nights, and that would be kind of like, there's some funky things in Arabian Nights too. Like I remember combing through that once before, and there's stuff that you see in Arabian Nights that was functionally reprinted in later sets with just some differences in like how they're implemented and what they cost. So yeah, I think basically the menu coming up will be Eldraine once that gets all set. After Eldraine, we'll go back to Arabian Nights, and then while we're waiting for the Eldraine list to actually finish up, I like to have the list incomplete. I have it completed and done. We'll maybe look at some, I don't know, pre-constructed kind of stuffs or dual decks and see what's in those, and just kind of fill that space as time goes by. So that'll be it. I think we're gonna call it. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this is nice little background noise for you to kind of have playing while you're, I don't know, doing the dishes or just doing other things, editing your videos or doing whatever you do, and picking up some tidbits about the old cards that might be useful for you in your EDH gameplay. I'd say for beta, the cool ones that popped up would be, for me, Copper Tablet is one of them. That's an old school that's probably worth considering getting your hands on a couple, and just looking at something like going back over and looking at Northern Paladin and be like, oh, it hits permanents. Okay. So that's why when I did that one little EDH breakdown, we looked at the Paladins, saw where they might be applicable, and they're not completely irrelevant. It was kind of neat to like go back and see that and be like, okay, something to consider. So we're going to keep this project going. Don't you worry. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope this is I'm just repeating myself. So thank you for showing up and checking it out. Click the like button, subscribe if you do feel so. Wow, it's getting late. If you feel so inclined, or just throw me a subscribe, comment, that kind of stuff. Also, Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me. I'm on Twitter all the time, so at Johnny Slivers on Twitter. And yeah, I hope this is finding you well. And until next time, may your top decks be epic.